Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
You know how high blood pressure is called like a silent killer? Well, imagine kind of a similar threat, silently building up in your body, slowly damaging your liver. And that's what we're talking about today, ammonia buildup. We're taking a deep dive into this. We've got some fascinating research from a recent scientific paper in Science Advances, and then also there's a related article from Medical Express. What if I told you there was a drug already in trials that could potentially prevent this damage?
It's true, yeah. This research is really groundbreaking because it's really the first to show clearly how ammonia directly harms those liver cells in a way that's relevant to, well, us, to humans.
So let's break this down.
Okay.
First, what exactly is ammonia, and where does it come from?
So ammonia is a natural byproduct. It's basically what happens when your body breaks down proteins. It's waste, essentially, but it's toxic to cells, especially in high amounts.
Okay, that makes sense. So our body has some way of dealing with this toxic ammonia, right?
Absolutely. Your liver is like a super efficient waste treatment plant. It uses a process called the urea cycle. And this cycle converts ammonia into urea, which is much less harmful. And then that can be safely flushed out in your urine.
So the liver is the hero here, keeping things running smoothly. But what happens when this system starts to fail? The study mentioned hyperammonemia. What does that mean?
Well, hyperammonemia just means you have too much ammonia in your blood. That can happen for a few reasons. Maybe your liver is damaged from a condition like cirrhosis. Or maybe you have a genetic disorder that's impacting the urea cycle.
And that's where this study comes in, right? It kind of sheds light on how this ammonia overload actually damages the liver.
Exactly. The researchers, they identified these proteins called RIPK1 and RIPK3. When ammonia levels rise, these proteins, they increase. And then they really start to wreak havoc on the mitochondria.
Wait, mitochondria, weren't those like the energy things?
Yes, you got it. Think of mitochondria as the tiny powerhouses inside each cell. They provide all the energy your cells need to function. So when they're damaged, well, the cells can't do their job properly.
So that's bad news, obviously. But how does ammonia lead to more damage? It sounds like a vicious cycle.
You're exactly right. It is a vicious cycle, like a domino effect. More damage to the liver, more ammonia buildup, and it just gets worse and worse. This is especially bad for people with cirrhosis, which, already affects millions of people.
And the study really highlights how serious a complication hyperammonemia is for people with cirrhosis. Confusion, coma, even death.
Really serious stuff. And this research, it has implications way beyond cirrhosis. It could potentially help children with urea cycle disorders and other genetic conditions that lead to ammonia buildup.
So that brings us to the potential new drug, YAQ005. What's the story with that?
Well, YAQ005 is exciting because it's patented and licensed. And get this, it's currently in phase 2 trials for acute on chronic liver failure, a condition that's often related to cirrhosis.
How does it actually work? Does it clean up the ammonia somehow?
It's actually more sophisticated than that. YAQ005 works by stopping that mitochondrial damage in the liver cells. This allows the urea cycle to function as it should, and it can clear out the ammonia naturally.
So it's like getting to the root of the problem, not just masking the symptoms, huh? That's pretty incredible. But they didn't just study YAQ005. What about this REP56?
That's right. The researchers were looking at different approaches. REP56, it works differently from YAQ005. It blocks that RIPK1 pathway directly.
Right, RIPK1, that was one of the bad guy proteins we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Think of it as intercepting those bad guys before they get to their target. The interesting thing is, both YAQ005 and RIPK56, they significantly reduced liver injury and cell death in mice.
So that's like having multiple tools to fight this ammonia problem. Different targets, but the same goal to protect the mitochondria.
Exactly. And there's another layer to this. The study found increased activity in the TLR4 signaling pathway in the mice with hyperammonemia.
TLR4 signaling pathway. Okay, what's that all about?
So TLR4 is normally involved in the body's immune response, but it can also trigger the production of those RAPK1 proteins, the ones that damage the mitochondria. And what's really interesting is that blocking TLR4, it actually led to lower ammonia levels A and D, less liver damage. They did this with a drug called TK005. Which, by the way, is actually the same drug as YAQ005.
Wow, so YAQ005 is like a multitasker. hitting multiple targets to protect the liver.
That's one of the most interesting things about this research. It's like they found a control point in this whole complex system.
Okay, that's all well and good, but how do they actually know that the urea cycle is breaking down?
Well, they have ways to measure this. They looked at the urea levels in the blood, and what they found was that the urea levels weren't increasing like you'd expect, even with all that extra ammonia. This is a good sign that the urea cycle wasn't working properly.
So they had evidence from the blood, but they also did this liver metabolomics thing. It sounds complicated.
Think of it like taking inventory. In the liver, they looked at all the different molecules, and what they found was a buildup of all the parts needed for that urea cycle, which, pretty much confirmed that the process was stuck.
So like a factory, right, you see all these half-finished products, but no final product. Something's definitely wrong.
A great way to put it. And this really supports their idea that ammonia is messing up that normal function of the urea cycle.
Now, earlier you said the mitochondria are being damaged, but how does ammonia actually DO that? Like, is it directly attacking them?
Well, that's where it gets even more interesting. The study suggests that ammonia might be directly hitting those mitochondria. But to be sure, more research is needed.
So a new puzzle piece. But we still need more research to see where it really fits in. Speaking of research, how did they actually do this study?
Well, they used a few different approaches. They needed to figure out how to simulate hyperammonemia in the lab, right? So they used what's called an amino acid-induced mouse model. They basically gave these mice a specific mix of amino acids that's known to increase ammonia levels.
Okay, so they made this model to mimic what happens in people with hyperammonemia. But mice aren't humans.
Exactly. And that's one of the limitations of the study. We have to be cautious about applying these findings to humans. We definitely need clinical trials with humans before we get too excited about potential treatments.
Right, important point. But even with that limitation, it gives a lot of hope. And it points to some really exciting new ways to treat things. It's amazing that they might be on the verge of a new era for treating hyperammonemia.
It really is. This research has the potential to be huge, to change lives.
It's a great reminder that science is always moving forward, and there's always more to discover. But before we get too carried away, let's talk about the broader implications of this research.
Yeah, the implications go way beyond just treating one condition, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about a whole new understanding of how ammonia affects the body, not just the liver.
That's fascinating. So what are some other applications beyond cirrhosis and those genetic disorders?
Well, think about it. If ammonia can damage liver cells, could it be affecting other organs too? This research could open up new avenues for understanding and treating other things, conditions we might not even associate with ammonia right now.
That's kind of mind-blowing. It's like they've found this hidden threat, and we're just starting to understand it. But let's get back to those two drugs for a second. YAQ-005 and RIPA56. They both seem promising, but they work in different ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you walk me through that again?
Sure. So YAQ-0005, remember, is designed to prevent that TLR4 pathway from activating, the one that triggers the production of those harmful RIPK1 proteins.
Right, like shutting down the factory before it even starts making those bad proteins.
Exactly. And the researchers, they tested YAQ-005 in two different mouse models of hyperammonemia. One was the amino acid-induced model we talked about. The other was what's called an OTC-deficient mouse model. This one's designed to mimic a specific genetic disorder that affects the urea cycle.
So they're testing it in different scenarios, depending on the cause of the hyperammonemia. That's a smart move. But what about RIPA56? How do they test that one?
RIPA56, remember, works by directly blocking those RIPK1 proteins, prevents them from reaching the mitochondria and doing damage. They tested RIPA56 in the amino acid-induced mouse model, and they found it was just as effective as YAQ-005 at reducing liver injury and cell death.
Wow, so two different approaches, both working. That's really encouraging. Seems like they really did their homework, using multiple models and approaches to really figure out how ammonia affects the liver.
They did. And that's one of the things that makes this study so important. They've really set the stage for a whole new understanding of hyperammonemia. But there's another thing I want to point out. Remember that TLR4 pathway? Well, they didn't just see it was more active. They actually targeted it with a drug called TK242 in a rat model of acute on chronic liver failure.
Wait, TK242? Isn't that the same as YAQ-0005?
It is. And this rat model, it's actually clinically relevant to humans with acute on chronic liver failure, which, as we discussed, is often associated with cirrhosis.
So they wanted to see if blocking TLR4 with TK242 could protect the liver in this specific situation. did it work?
The results were really promising. They found that TK242 significantly reduced ammonia levels and even decreased the coma rate in the rats. Pretty impressive.
That's amazing. So it sounds like this TK242, or YAQ005, could be a real game changer for treating a lot of liver conditions. But before we get too excited, we need to be realistic about the limitations of the research. We've already talked about the need for human trials. What other limitations are there?
Well, for one thing, remember, this study was mainly focused on one specific type of liver damage. We need more research to understand how ammonia affects other types of liver disease.
Right, that makes sense. And the researchers themselves say that there's still a lot we don't know about exactly how ammonia causes damage at the cellular level. The study mentions that ammonia didn't directly kill the liver cells in the lab. So how is it doing the damage in a living being?
That's a great question. It's one of the big mysteries. And it really highlights the need for more research. It suggests that the damage isn't just a simple, direct attack by the ammonia itself, but a more complex thing, maybe involving some kind of inflammatory response.
So not like ammonia is some tiny wrecking ball just smashing into cells.
Not exactly. One idea is that maybe the ammonia triggers an inflammatory response. And this response then leads to the release of, these damaging signaling molecules, which are what actually harm the liver cells. Remember that TLR4 pathway we talked about? It's part of the immune system. So it's possible that the ammonia is setting off some kind of alarm in the liver, activating this pathway, and then boom, those harmful proteins start getting made.
So it's more like an indirect attack, a chain reaction that leads to the damage. Sounds like there's a lot more to uncover here.
There is, and that's what's so exciting about it. This research has opened up so many new avenues for understanding and treating not only liver disease, but maybe even other things too.
It's incredible to think that something as simple as ammonia could have such a big effect on our health. But what can our listeners do with this knowledge? It's fascinating, but they can't just go out and start prescribing YAQ005, can they?
You're right. But knowing is half the battle, right? Even without new drugs, there are things you can do to take care of your liver and minimize the risk of ammonia building up.
Give us the goods. What can people do to keep their livers healthy?
Well, maintaining a healthy weight is crucial. Obesity is a major risk factor for liver disease, including cirrhosis. Eating a balanced diet, exercising regularly, all those things are essential.
So all those New Year's resolutions to hit the gym and eat healthier, they might be good for your liver too. What about alcohol? We all know that too much drinking is bad for your liver.
Oh, absolutely. Alcohol is a big problem when it comes to liver damage. It makes it harder for the liver to process ammonia. So moderation is key.
And it's never too late to make changes, right? Even small changes to your diet and lifestyle can make a big difference. But while we wait for those promising drugs like YAQ005 to become available, what can people do to stay up to date on this research and, other developments in liver health?
That's a great question. I would say stay curious and keep learning. There are lots of good resources online and offline. Check out the websites of organizations like the American Liver Foundation or the National Institutes of Health. They have tons of information on liver health, including the latest research. And of course, you can always talk to your doctor. They can answer specific questions and give you advice.
That's great advice. Staying informed and being proactive about our health is so important, especially for vital organs like our liver. But before we finish up, I want to circle back to that idea that ammonia might be triggering an inflammatory response. It's a fascinating idea. Are there any implications of that? Could it lead to new treatments?
You're thinking like a scientist. That's a really insightful question, and it's something that researchers are definitely looking into. If we can understand how ammonia triggers inflammation in the liver, we might be able to come up with new treatments that target that inflammation.
So instead of just trying to remove the ammonia, maybe we could try to calm down the immune system, prevents the damage from happening.
That's the idea. It's kind of like a two-pronged approach. You've got drugs like YAQ05 or RAPA56 to protect the mitochondria, and then you could also have anti-inflammatory drugs to, dampen down that immune response.
That's really interesting, hitting the problem from both sides. But could there be any downsides to targeting the immune system like that?
That's a good question, and it's something that needs to be carefully considered. The immune system is vital. It protects us from infections and diseases, so any treatment that targets the immune system needs to be very carefully designed so we don't cause other problems.
It's like walking a tightrope. You want to suppress the bad inflammation, but you don't want to weaken the whole immune system at the same time.
Exactly. It's a balancing act. But the potential benefits could be huge. If we can target that inflammatory response caused by ammonia, we might be able to prevent or even reverse liver damage in a completely new way.
This has been amazing. We've gone so deep into the world of ammonia and the liver. It's incredible how interconnected our bodies are, and how something seemingly simple can have such a big impact.
It is, and that's what keeps science so exciting. There's always more to learn, and every new discovery has the power to make a real difference. Yeah, it really makes you think, what other things are hiding in our bodies? What haven't we discovered yet?
Right. It just shows how important research is.
Yeah.
This study was all about the liver. But are there any other organs or systems that researchers are, really interested in when it comes to ammonia?
Well, the brain is a big one. High levels of ammonia can be toxic to brain cells. It can lead to something called hepatic encephalopathy.
Hepatic encephalopathy. What's that?
It can cause a bunch of neurological problems, confusion, disorientation, even coma or death.
That sounds pretty serious.
Huh.
So if this research is helping us understand how ammonia damages the liver, could it also help us understand what's happening in the brain?
It's definitely possible. Researchers are looking into whether the same mechanisms are at work in the brain. If they can figure out those pathways, it could lead to new treatments for hepatic encephalopathy and other neurological conditions related to ammonia.
That would be amazing. It's like solving one puzzle could help us solve a bunch of others. But you mentioned earlier that ammonia didn't directly kill liver cells in the lab. So how do we even start to fix the problem if it's not a direct attack?
That's a really important point. It shows just how complex this whole thing is. It's probably not just about ammonia molecules going around and attacking cells directly. It's likely more complicated, maybe involving that inflammatory response we talked about.
So maybe the focus should be on understanding how the body reacts to ammonia, not just trying to get rid of it.
Exactly. We need to understand the whole process that leads to cell damage, and then figure out how to stop it. That might mean using a few different approaches, like drugs to protect the cells from damage and therapies to target the inflammation.
So we're moving towards a more whole body approach, treating the cause, not just the symptom.
That's the idea. And this study is a huge step in that direction. It's given us so much new information about how ammonia, the liver, and the immune system all work together.
This deep dive has been incredible. We've uncovered a whole new world inside our bodies, with ammonia as the surprise villain. It really shows that there's so much we still don't know about how our bodies work, and how different systems can be connected in ways we wouldn't expect.
I know, and that's what makes science so amazing. There's always more to learn, and those new discoveries can change lives.
Before we go, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. This study was about the liver, but since ammonia can affect other organs...
It makes you wonder what else might be going on in there, right?
Yeah. Exactly. It really highlights how important research is. We've learned a lot today, but there's always more to discover. And remember, you don't have to wait for new drugs or treatments to start taking care of your health. There are things you can do right now to protect your liver, like maintaining a healthy weight, watching your alcohol intake, and staying informed about the latest research. Thanks for joining us for this amazing deep dive into the world of ammonia and the liver. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to the original research in Science Advances and the article from Medical Express, and all those other resources we talked about. Until next time, stay curious.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.